it's our understanding, Mark, you caught up with Mitch Marner today.
I did.
Anything? What can you reveal to us that stuck out from your conversation with Mitch?
Yeah, you know what? I just really kind of wanted to drill down a bit on why he he spoke in Vegas at his news conference, his introduction there, like why he liked Vegas, why the Golden Knights were attractive to him. But I'm just wanted to drill down a little bit more on how he got to the point where he was ready to leave his hometown team, because I'm not sure he's really come out and address that. I mean, we've guessed, we could see, it seemed to be weighing on him certain things, but I've never heard him really articulate it. So that was kind of my thought process coming into the interview. I asked him, first of all, I asked him, I said, what was, you built up all these friendships, you spent 9 seasons with the Leafs. What was the hardest goodbye? He said the phone call with Austin Matthews was very emotional. He would have preferred to do it in person, but Austin had gone back to Arizona. And then he just said, Riley, Nylander, Tavares, guys that we went through a lot together. They leaned on each other when things got tough, and those were the tough guys. And then I just said, oh, well, why? It didn't have to be tough. He could have stayed. He didn't want to give a detailed answer on that. He just said, needed a change, needed a fresh start, basically, a new chapter. And then I said, well, is it because the market was tough? And he didn't want to go down there. But then as we got more into it, I think you can just tell where he was at because, his agent, Aaron Ferris, he did an interview on a podcast, 100% Hockey. And he kind of came out and said, after the season ended, police, they needed protection for Marner's house security because, stuff was getting dumped in his yard and there was even a death threat. And, Marner, I asked him about that and he got into it about how hard it was. And he's a new dad and, he doesn't like not feeling safe when he goes for a walk with his kid and he goes for a walk with his dog. And so we got into that a little bit more and he was kind of open about that and just how tough it was and how he had a mental coach for the last 3 years to try and help him tune out what was going on in the market and deal with it properly. Anyway, so that was that's kind of what popped out. And he kind of got into a little bit of how hard it was, in a way for him to deal with it, to deal with everything, and why he got to the point where, he's leaving his hometown team, which was a dream come true. Got drafted by his hometown team. This is what you live for. You grow up, you dream of being a Leaf. So how did he get to the point where he just wanted to leave?
Did he speak of the Leafs, glowingly or with disdain? Like, how did he when he started speaking about the Leafs? Because some guys have a difficult time, like, actually kind of releasing themselves from it because he hasn't been in Vegas yet. He hasn't played for, in his mindset, he might still be a Leaf in a way. Did he speak of it as like a distant past, or how did he relate to even, talking about the Leafs?
Well, yeah, it was, I don't know if we even, I don't know if I got a great read on that. A lot of it was just kind of rehashing stuff, and what he's gone through. It was funny at the end. I just, I thanked him. I said, it was great catching up. And he's like, oh, good to see you. And I was like, I'm not sure you missed this. He's like, yeah, I might miss you a little bit. And then he was like, yeah, the schedule makers didn't really do it right. Like when I come back to Toronto, it's a back-to-back. And I'm like, people think that that's a good thing for you. Less time in the spotlight, less time in the chaos of what Toronto's going to be like. And he was like, no, I would have preferred to have a day at home. So he's already at least contemplated that. So perhaps that's a sign that he's already thinking about that and he's turned the page a little bit there. And, we didn't get we really didn't get too much into the Leafs side of it. It was more about him and his personality, but it did feel, at least in that part and how we ended it, that he was already kind of looking forward to next year.
Mark, when you were speaking with Mitch, did you get the impression that some of this reaction surprised him, or if he was braced for it? Because you see so often when an athlete leaves a place they've been for a long time, they're so far inside their day-to-day, so far inside their sport that they may not be as tuned into this stuff as we are. But did you get the sense that this caught him off guard at all? Because it seems to have affected him.
Yeah, it's funny. I kind of I talked to Jeannie Bouchard when she announced her retirement, and she talked about how she was so surprised at the positivity around her announcement, with everyone saying. And it was kind of a weird thing to say because, like, why wouldn't people be, she went to the Wimbledon final. She did a lot of great things for Canadian tennis. She's like, I've been so beaten down by the negativity on social media that I'm so numb to it that it was a surprise that anything was positive. And it kind of feels like Mitch got to that point in Toronto. And I asked him, like, it wasn't all negative. Like, you got a lot of love. A lot of people loved you. You're fifth in franchise scoring. You had the charitable thing. There were a lot of people loved Mitch Marner and appreciated what he did. And he's like, yeah, but it was always the hate comments that you heard the most or that got through the most. So I think he's a little bit numb to the reaction. He would have obviously contemplated, what the market would think of that. But I think he'd already gotten to a point where he said he had to have security outside his house for 2 weeks after the playoffs ended. So I don't know. I think he just got to a point where all that just kind of blurred together and was numb a little bit in terms of like now kind of turning into a villain, I guess if you want to call it that, in the market.
Mm. Have you heard of players, maybe all of us can contribute on this, like having a mental coach to handle the noise? I've never heard of that before. You heard of that, Mark?
I hear about it in a lot of different sports. Goalies, I know, have I think more so goalies. I remember talking to Dennis Hildeby about, and he was using the same guy Jesper Bratt uses, and like just having a mental I guess it's mostly called a sports psychologist, I guess, and teams themselves have that on their staff and guys to talk to. But a player, I've heard that, but I did that was in response. He talked about that in response to the question was how much did what you're going and dealing with off the ice impact how you played on the ice? And that's when he said that I got this mental coach, and he's still a 100-point player despite obviously dealing with this, and got nominated for the Selke in recent years, and obviously we know what happened in the playoffs, but he still emerged. He was still on Team Canada. He's going to be on Canada's Olympic team. He still was able to do some incredible things despite that. But yeah, I have heard that before. I just found it interesting that he brought it up specifically when talking about the market. Because obviously guys deal with pressure, but
right.
It can sometimes be a different type of pressure.
Okay, it's not uncommon for guys to have a mental coach or a sports psychologist, but I think it's always about on the ice, or most of the time it's about on the ice, right? And then when things that are happening off the ice bleed into performance on the ice, even though we look at it and say, well, the guy is a 102-point player, but he's probably not focused on the regular season portion. He's probably looking at it like, why am I roadblocked in a game 5 or a game 6 or a game 7? And how do I get over that? Because realistically, it's those 3 games of the last, whatever it is, 8 or 9 years that have probably caused this whole thing. Because if you looked at it from the regular season, you're like, Mitch Marner's a great player, should be a Leaf for life, should never leave. But we're so focused on a large sample size of basically 3 games towards the end of a series. And I guess my question to you, Mark, is, if the Leafs do find a way to get past Florida, is Mitch Marner still a Maple Leaf? Is he getting the death threats, or does he have to hire security or police in front of his house? And are we talking about Mitch Marner being a Leaf for life?
Yeah, in that Florida series, game 2, he scores the game-winning goal, and he's at the podium, and it just felt like a really big high moment. So I don't know. It just feels like he had gotten to the point with where the market was at. But if they win that series, I'd probably like them to beat Carolina. And then they're in the cup. Who knows, right? It's hard to go down that road, but just certainly talking to him today, it felt like he had reached a point with where things were at the market where it felt like, and you could sense it all year. Like you could feel it with him and how he kind of handled certain moments that maybe he needed a fresh start. It was stale. And frankly, maybe that's just part of that is the team being stale and the core being stale, because we've talked about it ad nauseum forever. And he certainly, I'm sure, it felt like, he didn't say this, but like it felt like he was the kind of the face of it, right? Like he would take the most heat when the season ended up, even though it wasn't just him that was not coming through in those games 5, 6, and 7. But clearly he was a polarizing guy, and Austin goes to Arizona, perhaps in the immediate aftermath of the season. William can get out to Sweden, but he was really there. It never really stopped for him, is the sense I got. So, it's quite something that this hometown guy, got to this point with the Leafs.
Yeah, no kidding. I do think it was still on both sides. It's in the best interest for this to play out this way. Like someone had to go. It's Mitch. Leafs move on. He moves on.